Why did the silence feel heavier than the dead? She stood at the edge of the ruined street, boots crunching against broken glass, the smell of smoke clawing at her lungs. Around her, the bodies of men she had trained with, laughed with, argued with, now lay twisted in unnatural shapes. The radio hissed, no voices answering. Death had claimed them all, yet somehow she was still standing. Her rifle felt heavier than steel, not because of its weight but because of what it meant now. She had carried it through the night, through gunfire and dust, through screaming orders and the snap of bullets that had cut friends down mid-sentence. She hadn't dared lower it, not even once. And now, in the stillness, she realized her fingers still curled tight around the trigger, her cheek pressed to a stock slick with blood she wasn't sure was hers. She swallowed hard. The air was bitter, burned-out wiring and gasoline. A dog barked in the distance, then yelped once, abruptly silenced. The city was no longer alive. It was breathing its last. She should have been gone with them. That was the thought echoing louder than the silence. She should have been on that convoy, in that armored vehicle that had erupted into fire with the others who had no chance to crawl free. She had been 100 meters behind, moving on foot because her instinct, no, her paranoia, had kept her out of the transport. And that instinct had saved her. But surviving did not feel like a victory. It felt like betrayal. Her name was Captain Elena Marquez. Call sign, Raven, but names didn't matter now. No one alive was here to call her by it. She adjusted her earpiece, forcing her voice steady, whispering into static. "This is Raven, any call sign, respond. Over." Nothing, just the faint crackle, like the sound of fire dying. She closed her eyes, tilted her head back, and felt the warmth of the rising sun brushing against her soot-streaked face. Dawn should have been a relief. Instead, it painted the wreckage in cruel honesty. Blood trails, shattered helmets, a half-burned photograph pinned beneath rubble, a child's smile, frozen, never to grow older. She clenched her jaw, bent down, and pulled the photograph free. It belonged to Sergeant Cole. He'd always carried it tucked in his vest, showing anyone who'd listened the gap-toothed grin of his daughter. Now the edges were scorched, the image warped. She stared at it until her chest ached, then folded it carefully and slid it into her pocket. She couldn't save Cole, but maybe she could carry this piece of him. The sound of shifting rubble snapped her back. She froze. Not everything here was dead. She dropped to a crouch, rifle raised, heart hammering. Every shadow felt like a predator, every flicker of movement a threat. Then there, a figure, small, moving between collapsed walls, not a soldier, a child. Her stomach tightened. The girl couldn't have been more than 10, dust coating her hair, eyes wide with animal terror. She clutched something in her hand, bread, stale, maybe stolen from an abandoned pack. Elena lowered her weapon slowly, careful not to spook her. She whispered, more to herself than the child, "Where did you come from?" The girl's lips trembled. She said nothing, just stood, trembling like a rabbit caught between running and freezing. Elena reached into her pouch, pulled free her canteen, and set it gently on the ground. "Water," she murmured. "Take it." The girl hesitated, then darted forward, snatched it, and disappeared into the rubble before Elena could say another word. Only the sound of her bare feet fatting into the distance remained. Elena exhaled slowly, lowering her rifle. A ghost of humanity still alive in this graveyard, but the moment left her shaken. If the child had survived, others might be hiding too, which meant she wasn't just alone among the dead. She was responsible in ways she hadn't asked for. She pressed her back against a wall, closing her eyes for a second. She remembered something her father once told her, back before she ever wore a uniform. He had been a firefighter, he said. Sometimes surviving isn't the hard part. It's looking around and realizing you're the only one left to tell the story. At the time she hadn't understood, now she did. She should move. Stay still too long and the silence would swallow her. She scanned the street again, forcing her boots forward. Step by step, careful, she passed the burned-out skeleton of the convoy. The smell of melted metal and flesh clung to the air. She forced herself not to look too closely at the bodies. She knew them by the gear, by the positions they fell in, but she couldn't bear to attach faces anymore. Not yet. Not when her own face still wore the mask of the living. Her radio crackled. A sound, not a voice, but a burst. She froze, clutching it like it was salvation. "Avon copy." Her chest tightened. Someone was alive somewhere. She pressed the button, her voice almost breaking. "This is Raven. Say again, I copy." Static swallowed the rest. A frequency too weak, too broken. But it was enough. Enough to tell her she wasn't alone in this wasteland. She scanned the horizon. The sun was climbing, washing the city in pale gold. In the distance, the broken spire of a church rose above the ruins. She remembered the map briefing before everything went to hell. That church had been marked as a fallback point, a rally spot. If anyone had made it through, that's where they'd go. Her throat tightened. The briefing, the room where she'd sat at the end of the table, listening to voices that spoke over her. They hadn't looked at her, not really. Not when she'd raised doubts about the convoy route. Not when she'd suggested splitting forces, sending a scout ahead. She'd seen the commander's eyes flick past her like she wasn't even there, like her words carried no weight. She wanted to be wrong that night. God, she wanted to be wrong. But the fireball she had watched from the rear guard proved otherwise. She gritted her teeth. She wasn't going to crumble here. Not in this silence, not with ghosts all around. She slung her rifle, adjusted the strap on her pack, and started moving toward the spire. Each step echoed louder in her head than the last. She wasn't walking just for herself anymore. She was walking for Cole, for Ramirez, for Bennett, the ones who would never take another step. She carried their story now. But what story would it be? One of blind slaughter, or one of survival carved from the ruins? She didn't know, not yet. She passed through a courtyard littered with shell casings, the stench of burned fabric heavy in the air. She kept her eyes sharp, scanning windows, doorways, shadows. Her training kept her alive, but her thoughts kept circling back to the weight in her pocket, the scorched photograph pressing against her side. That child's smile haunted her more than the silence. She thought of the girl who had darted away with her canteen. Was she still running now? Was she hiding, clutching that water like treasure? And why had Elena felt such a pull, such a raw ache when their eyes met? She shook the thought, focus. The church was still blocks away, and in this city every block was a battlefield, whether the fighting was still happening or not. As she approached an alley, a faint sound drifted to her ears. Not static, not silence, something else. A low groan, human. Her breath caught. Someone was alive. She raised her rifle, moving carefully toward the sound. Her boots scuffed against the dirt, her heart hammering. She rounded the corner. And froze. It was Lieutenant Harris. His legs pinned under a slab of concrete, his uniform blackened with soot, his breathing ragged. His eyes met hers, widening with disbelief. "Marquez," his voice cracked like it hadn't spoken in hours. "You're alive." She lowered her weapon instantly, rushing to his side. Kneeling, she gripped his hand. It was cold, trembling. "I thought," he coughed, blood on his lips. "I thought no one." "Don't talk," she whispered. "I've got you." But as she stared at the slab crushing his legs, reality bit hard. He wasn't getting out. Not without equipment, not without help. And there was no help, just her. Harris saw it in her eyes. He gave a faint, broken smile. "You always said they never listened to you. Guess you were right." She shook her head, tears stinging. "Don't. Don't waste it," he rasped. Tell them what happened here." Her grip tightened on his hand, but words refused to come. The silence pressed down, heavy, relentless. Harris coughed again, his eyes dimming. He whispered something she almost didn't catch. "Walk for us." Then his hand went limp. Elena bowed her head. For a long moment she stayed there, gripping the hand of a man who had once laughed with her over rations, argued with her about tactics, and ignored her warnings like the rest. Now he left her with a weight she wasn't sure she could carry. But she had no choice. She stood, adjusted her pack, looked toward the spire on the horizon, and walked. The silence followed her like a shadow, but so did something else. A story, one no one could kill. Why did her boots sound so loud when everything else had gone quiet? Every step toward the spire seemed to echo through the ruins, as if the city itself was listening. Elena kept her rifle raised, scanning windows, doorways, rooftops, any place an enemy might linger. But it wasn't the thought of enemies that made her skin crawl. It was the sense that silence itself was alive, breathing just out of reach. The church spire cut through the smoke on the horizon, jagged but still standing. She clung to it like a compass. If there was a rally point left, if anyone else had survived, they'd be there. And if not, she'd still go. Because she needed a direction, any direction, to keep moving. The photograph in her pocket pressed against her side as she walked. Cole's little girl. That smile was burned into her, an anchor she hadn't asked for but couldn't let go of. She touched it once briefly, then pulled her hand away. Too much weight, too much to carry if she let herself feel it. A sudden sound cut her off, metal clattering. Elena dropped to a knee, weapon up, heart hammering. She waited, breath caught in her throat. Another noise, softer this time, a scrape, something moving. She pivoted toward the alley, finger brushing the trigger. And then, a voice, low, human. "Don't shoot." Her chest clenched. She inched forward, rifle steady. From the shadow of the alley, a figure emerged slowly, hands raised, face pale beneath streaks of soot. Private First Class Jennings, barely 20, his helmet gone, uniform torn, one arm pressed tight against his side where blood seeped through fabric. Elena exhaled in disbelief. "Jennings." He stumbled forward, almost collapsing. She lunged, catching him under the arm, easing him against the wall. His face was waxy, eyes sunken, but he was alive. "I thought I was," he coughed, grimacing, "the only one." "You're not." Her voice cracked more than she wanted it to. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a painful wheeze. "Guess I owe you $20, said you never outlast us." Her throat tightened. She remembered the card game 2 nights before, Jennings smirking as he raked in chips, teasing her about being the quiet one, the shadow in the corner. She smirked back but said nothing. And now here he was, barely holding onto breath. She tore a strip from her sleeve, pressing it against his wound. He flinched but didn't resist. His blood was hot against her fingers. Too much, too fast. "We've got to move," she said, forcing calm. "Can you walk?" Jennings swallowed hard, nodded. "For now." They moved slowly, her shoulder braced under his, steps uneven. Every block stretched forever. She tried to ignore the way his weight sagged heavier with each step, tried not to think of how pale his lips were growing. At one corner he whispered, "Why you, Captain? Why you and not?" She knew what he meant. Why was she standing when so many others were? She didn't answer, couldn't. The silence between them said enough. But inside, her thoughts churned. She remembered the briefing again, the moment she had spoken up, warning about the convoy route. How the commander had dismissed her, his tone clipped, moving on to someone else. She remembered Jennings sitting 2 seats away, grinning at something Ramirez whispered, not hearing her at all. Now his question echoed louder than her memory. Why her? Why had she been spared by instinct, by doubt, by fate? They reached a collapsed storefront. She lowered Jennings against the wall to catch their breath. His eyes fluttered, sweat dripping down his temple. "Captain," his voice was weak. "Don't lie to me. I'm not making it, am I?" Elena's jaw clenched. She wanted to deny it, to promise, to give him the comfort of hope. But his gaze locked onto hers, steady, searching, and she knew he didn't want lies. So she told the truth, quietly, "I don't know." He gave a faint, broken smile. "Fair enough." For a moment they sat in silence. Then Jennings whispered something unexpected. "You ever think about home, like if you'll ever really see it again?" She swallowed, looking away. The question hit harder than the silence. She had a home once. A small house near the coast, her mother's garden always alive with color. But the war had dragged her farther and farther until the memory felt like a photograph left in the rain, blurred, fragile. I think about it, she said finally, but it feels far. Jennings nodded weakly. Yeah, same. His eyes closed, his breathing slowing. Elena's chest ached. She reached out, gripping his shoulder. Stay with me, we're almost there. He didn't answer. Her throat tightened. She shook him once gently. His chest still rose, but faint, too faint. She forced herself to move. She had to get him to the church. If there was any chance, any medic, any supplies, she had to try. With a grunt, she hoisted him back up, his weight slumping against her. Step by step, they moved again. Her muscles burned, but she didn't stop. As they crossed into the shadow of the church, she felt her breath hitch. The spire loomed above, blackened but unbroken. The heavy wooden doors stood ajar. Jennings, she whispered, we made it. She pushed the door open with her shoulder, easing him inside. The smell hit first, blood, sweat, the copper tang of the wounded. Then the sound, voices, low, ragged survivors. She blinked in disbelief. There were maybe a dozen, soldiers, locals, 2 medics bent over makeshift cots, wounded laid out on pews stripped bare. Heads turned as she entered, eyes widened. A sergeant she recognized, O'Neill, stood up. His face was streaked with ash, but his posture stiffened when he saw her. Marquez, he said, disbelief in his tone, we thought you were gone. She lowered Jennings gently to the floor as medics rushed forward. Her knees trembled, relief colliding with exhaustion. But as she looked around, at the battered, hollow faces staring back, she realized survival was not enough. O'Neill's voice broke the silence again. What the hell happened out there? Elena met his eyes, the weight of the dead pressing on her shoulders. She thought of Harris's last words, tell them what happened here. But the truth was a blade, and speaking it out loud meant cutting into wounds that hadn't stopped bleeding. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Not yet. There was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The silence of the church grew heavier. Survivors watched her, waiting for answers. And she realized something else. The hardest part wasn't surviving, it was what came after. Why did every pair of eyes feel like judgment? The church was dim, lit only by slivers of morning light filtering through shattered stained glass windows. Dust floated in the beams, settling on broken pews turned into makeshift cots. Every survivor looked at her like she was carrying something they wanted. Answers, hope, maybe both. Elena stood just inside the door, rifle slung but ready, boots planted. The silence stretched, thick enough to suffocate. Then O'Neill spoke again. We were told the convoy was secure, he said, voice hoarse, gaze sharp. So why are you standing here and not the rest of them? The words weren't meant as cruelty, but they cut anyway. Her jaw clenched. She could hear Harris's last rasp in her head, tell them what happened. But how do you tell the truth when it meant admitting you had seen the cracks before the collapse, that you had raised your voice and been ignored, that every face now missing had looked right past you? Jennings stirred weakly on the floor beside her as the medics worked, his breath shallow. His presence anchored her, kept her from drowning in the stairs. I was rear guard, she said finally. Her voice felt too loud in the silence. Convoy took the main street. I saw it happen. I couldn't reach them. The survivors exchanged looks. Some eyes softened, others hardened. A corporal near the back spat onto the floor. Rear guard, lucky then. The word stung, lucky, as if survival were a prize, not a burden. Elena scanned the room. A local woman sat in the corner, holding a boy barely old enough to walk. A soldier with a missing hand rocked quietly on a bench, humming under his breath like he might crack if silence claimed him again. Everyone here was barely holding together. Her eyes drifted up to the altar. A crucifix leaned sideways, splintered from the blast that had rattled the walls. Dust clung to the figure's face. Even Christ seemed bent beneath the weight of it all. Jennings coughed suddenly, drawing her back. One of the medics, short, wiry, eyes sunken from exhaustion, looked up. "He's lost too much blood. If we don't get proper supplies soon, he won't last the night." The words punched the air out of her. She looked down at Jennings. His eyes were half-lidded, but he gave a faint smile. "Told you, not making it." "Don't," she whispered fiercely. "Not yet." The medic sighed. "We're rationing bandages, morphine. Half these people won't make it another day if we stay boxed in here." O'Neill turned toward her again. "Command gone dark. Comms are fried. The last order we had was to hold this point, but hold it for who? No one's coming." The bitterness in his tone drew murmurs from the others. Elena swallowed. The weight of leadership pressed down, unasked for. She wasn't the highest rank here, but the way they were staring at her, it felt like they wanted her to decide something none of them could. Her hands curled into fists. She thought of her father again, that voice in her memory. Sometimes surviving isn't the hard part. It's realizing you're the only one left to tell the story. She whispered almost to herself, "We can't stay here." The words drew silence, then sharp looks. "Move where?" someone snapped. "Through the streets, into another kill zone." "They'll find us here if they're still sweeping," O'Neill said grimly. "But moving without a plan, that's suicide." Elena's mind raced. She thought of the map burned into her memory. There had been a secondary extraction point. South, near the river. It wasn't close, and there was no guarantee anyone would be waiting. But staying meant waiting for death. Jennings stirred again, whispering so softly only she heard. "South, water." Her chest tightened. He remembered too. Even half-conscious, he remembered. Elena straightened, eyes hardening. "South," she said aloud. "The river, secondary fallback. If command left anyone, it's there." A wave of mutters swept through the room. Fear, doubt, hope tangled into one. O'Neill's eyes narrowed. "That's miles through open ground. Half of us can't walk that far." "Then we carry them," Elena said flatly. The room stilled. Her voice had come out sharper than intended, but she didn't take it back. The local woman's boy whimpered softly. Someone shifted on their cot. The broken crucifix above them loomed like judgment. Finally, O'Neill exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "You're asking us to gamble everything on a maybe." Elena met his gaze, steady. "Staying here isn't a gamble, it's a slow execution." The silence stretched again. Then slowly, one by one, heads began to nod. Not all, not with certainty, but enough. They would move. The medics worked quickly, repacking what supplies they had into torn satchels. 2 soldiers fashioned stretchers from doors ripped off their hinges. The boy clung to his mother, his eyes wide but silent. Elena moved among them, helping, steadying. But inside, her chest ached with doubt. She was asking them to follow her when she wasn't even sure she deserved to be standing. She caught O'Neill watching her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said quietly, "Why you, Marquez? Why now?" She hesitated, her throat tightened. The words she wanted to say burned but stayed locked. "Because I warned them, because I knew, and now they're gone and I'm not." Instead, she said, "Because someone has to walk us out of here." He held her gaze, then gave a single, tired nod. The survivors gathered at the doors, weapons checked, stretchers lifted, packs slung. The boy whimpered again but was hushed by his mother's hand. The church seemed to hold its breath. Elena touched the photograph in her pocket one last time, grounding herself. Then she pushed the heavy door open. The sunlight hit her face, bright and merciless. The street stretched ahead, cracked and broken, shadows twisting in every doorway. She stepped out first. The silence of the city greeted her again, waiting. And for the first time since the convoy burned, she wasn't walking alone. But as their footsteps echoed behind her, a darker thought gnawed at her chest. She hadn't told them everything. Not yet. Why did the city feel like it was holding its breath? They moved in a staggered line through the ruined streets, boots crunching against gravel, stretchers swaying with each uneven step. The silence wasn't empty, it was waiting. Every shadow felt like it might split open, every doorway like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. Elena led, eyes sharp, rifle raised. Behind her, O'Neill paced with clipped precision, scanning rooftops. The medic struggled with Jennings's stretcher, his face pale, eyes fluttering but still alive. The boy clung to his mother's hand, stumbling but quiet, too quiet for a child. Every few steps, Elena glanced back, counting them, making sure no one slipped away into the silence. She couldn't bear to lose more, not when they had already been carved down to ghosts. The air was hot, metallic. The sun beat down, harsh and unforgiving, throwing hard shadows across the broken pavement. She could hear her own pulse in her ears. Then, a sound sharp. Her fist shot up instantly. The column froze. She crouched, scanning, there. A metallic glint from a window 3 stories up, too still, too precise. Sniper! Her heart jolted. She hissed under her breath, cover. The world exploded. Glass shattered. A shot cracked, the sound ricocheting off concrete. One of the soldiers near the rear screamed, dropping hard. Blood spread across his chest. Chaos erupted. Survivors scrambled behind wreckage, dragging the wounded, shouting over one another. The boy wailed, his mother clutching him tight. Elena pressed herself against a wall, breath sharp. She could feel the weight of eyes on her again, not the survivors now, but the sniper above, hunting. She closed her eyes, forcing calm. She knew this dance. She had trained for it, lived it. She wasn't the strongest, not the fastest, but she could steady her breath when others panicked. Slowly she edged her rifle around the corner, scope raised. Her world narrowed. Shadows, broken glass, the rhythm of sunlight through dust. There, the faintest outline. A figure crouched in the window, rifle angled. She steadied her aim, breath out, finger slow on the trigger. The shot cracked. Glass sprayed, the figure jerked back, silence followed. She stayed still, waiting. 30 seconds, 60, no return fire. Finally, she lowered the rifle, chest heaving. Her finger shook as it slipped from the trigger. The street was quiet again, but the silence now felt different, charged, fragile. She turned. The soldier who'd gone down wasn't moving. Blood pooled beneath him. Another name to carry, another story cut off mid-sentence. The others were watching her, wide-eyed, breathless. And she realized, without wanting it, without asking for it, she had become the gravity they clung to. Her throat tightened. Leadership wasn't about orders, it was about weight, and every death made her heavier. The medic scrambled to Jennings again, checking his pulse, still alive, barely. O'Neill moved up beside her, jaw tight. You saved us back there. Elena shook her head. We lost another. That wasn't on you. His voice was low, steady, but his eyes told a different story. He was tired, all of them were. She adjusted her grip on her rifle. We keep moving. They moved again, slower now. Every rooftop a threat, every window a question. The boy's small sobs echoed through the streets, but no one hushed him. It was a reminder they were still alive. Hours passed like that. Blocks blurred into one another, broken cars, burned signs, the smell of dust and ash. Each survivor moved with hollow focus, their bodies mechanical, their minds elsewhere. At one point, a corporal began whispering to himself, a litany of names. Elena recognized some, lost brothers, lost friends. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. She didn't interrupt. She understood. Saying their names kept them alive for one more stretch of road. When the sun dipped low, shadows stretched long. They reached an overpass choked with wreckage. The river wasn't far now. Elena could smell the dampness on the wind. But the overpass was a choke point. Open ground, nowhere to hide. She scanned carefully. Her instincts screamed at her, too quiet. O'Neill's voice was tense. We go under it. Elena hesitated. Darkness under the overpass felt like walking into a mouth, but crossing the top meant being exposed, silhouetted against the sky. Jennings stirred weakly on his stretcher, whispering again, "South River." His voice was barely air. Her chest clenched. They had to keep moving. She looked at O'Neill. "We go under." The decision settled like a stone. They moved into the shadows. The air was cooler, damp. Echoes bounced against the concrete pillars. Every sound magnified: the scuff of boots, the squeak of a stretcher hinge, the ragged breaths of the wounded. Halfway through, a rock clattered from above. Elena froze. Figures dropped down from the overpass, shadows with weapons, eyes glinting in the dark. Not soldiers, militants, raiders, desperate men feeding on chaos. The survivors stumbled back, panic rising. One of the raiders shouted in a language Elena half understood, gesturing with his rifle. "Demands, orders." O'Neill raised his weapon. Elena grabbed his arm. Too many. She stepped forward instead, hands raised slightly. Not surrender, not yet, just slowing the storm. The raiders closed in. Their eyes raked over the stretchers, the wounded, the boy. They smelled weakness. Her chest tightened. Negotiation was thin ice, but if she fired, they would all die. The leader sneered, stepping closer, shoving his barrel toward her. His breath smelled of rot. His eyes glittered with cruelty. Elena stared back, unflinching. And for a moment, the silence between them felt sharper than any shot. Behind her, Jennings groaned weakly, his voice drifting through the shadows. "Walk for us." The words struck her like a blade. Harris's last plea, Jennings's fatting whisper. The dead, the living, they were all pressing her forward. The leader's sneer widened. He thought he saw fear. But Elena wasn't afraid. She was burning. Her hand moved fast, faster than thought. She shoved his rifle aside, slammed her stock upward into his jaw. Bone cracked. He staggered back. The world erupted. Gunfire ripped through the underpass, deafening. Survivors dove for cover, dragging the wounded. Shouts echoed, bullets sparking off concrete. Elena hit the ground, rolled, returned fire. One raider dropped. Another screamed. The boy wailed, his mother shielding him with her body. Chaos, pure chaos. And yet through it all, her mind was steady. Her training clicked in, her aim precise. She moved like a shadow among pillars, each shot measured, each breath controlled. Her world shrank to sound and sight, muzzle flash and silence. When it ended, the air was thick with gunpowder. The raiders lay scattered, their leader slumped against a pillar, jaw shattered, eyes lifeless. The survivors emerged slowly, trembling, breathless. One had taken a hit to the arm, but lived. Jennings still breathed, barely. Elena stood among the bodies, chest heaving. Her hands shook once, then stilled. The silence returned, heavy, relentless. But now every survivor looked at her with something different in their eyes. Not doubt, not luck. Something closer to belief. She swallowed hard. The weight on her shoulders grew heavier still. Because belief was more dangerous than bullets. And she knew one thing with piercing clarity. She hadn't told them everything. Not yet. The river did not sound like salvation. It sounded like teeth. The roar reached them before the water came into view, a low, endless growl echoing off the broken buildings, gnawing at nerves already frayed to nothing. When they finally stepped out from the wreckage, the sight stopped them cold. The bridge was gone. Or rather, what remained of it jutted like broken bones into the torrent. Concrete slabs snapped, rebar twisted upward like claws. The water below surged black and merciless, swollen with debris from months of ruin. The survivors stood in stunned silence. Even O'Neill, who had barked orders with steel since the start, just stared. Jennings lay pale and still on his stretcher, lips blue. The medics hovered, whispering numbers Elena didn't want to hear. The boy clutched his mother's leg, eyes wide. And in that silence, the truth pressed down like a hand on the throat. There would be no easy crossing. Elena's heart sank, but her face gave nothing. She forced herself to step forward, scanning both banks. The remnants of the bridge stretched like a challenge. Jumping slabs was suicide. The current below would swallow anyone who slipped. Her eyes tracked downstream. A half-collapsed pier jutted into the water, debris snarled against it. Maybe, maybe. O'Neill broke the silence, voice hoarse. There's no way across with stretchers, not like this. The words were heavy, final. The mother shook her head violently, clutching her son closer. There has to be, there has to be. Her voice cracked, raw with desperation. Jennings stirred faintly, eyes fluttering. His voice was a ghost. South, keep walking, river bends, ferry dock. His chest rattled with the effort. Elena knelt beside him, leaning close. His gaze found hers, unfocused but burning with something deeper than pain. You carry them, he whispered. Carry them for us. Her throat tightened. The words stabbed like knives, echoing Harris, echoing every loss. The dying kept passing the torch, and it kept landing in her hands. She didn't ask for this weight, but it was hers now. She rose slowly, scanning again. Options, risks, time. The current was lethal, but staying was worse. Raiders would regroup. Supplies were nearly gone, and Jennings wouldn't last another hour without real treatment. Her mind churned. They needed a way across, but not all of them would make it. She felt the eyes on her again. Survivors waiting, O'Neill waiting, the boy watching, silently pleading. Her pulse hammered. This was the cost of leadership. Not bullets, not enemies, but choices. And sometimes the choice was who lived and who didn't. They set to work. O'Neill led a team scavenging debris, lashing boards with wire, stripping canvas from ruined cars. Improvised rafts, flimsy, desperate things, but better than nothing. Elena paced the bank, watching the current devour branches, watching the foam spin in hungry circles. Her jaw ached from clenching. The medics whispered over Jennings. His pulse was fatting, his breath shallow. Finally, one of them looked at her, eyes bleak. He won't survive the crossing. The words landed like gunfire. She stared at Jennings, his skin waxen, sweat beading his brow. A man who had carried others, who had whispered hope when hope was gone. He deserved more than to drown in the black maw of this river. Her chest ached. O'Neill came beside her quietly. We can carry him, but it'll slow us, risk everyone. She turned sharply. You saying we leave him? His jaw flexed. He didn't answer, but the silence was answer enough. Elena's fists curled. Every part of her rebelled. She couldn't abandon him. She wouldn't. But leadership was weight, and weight crushed. Jennings stirred again, eyes glassy. His lips moved. She leaned close. Don't waste it, he breathed. Her eyes burned. She wanted to scream, to tear the sky open, to rage against the cruel arithmetic of survival. Instead, she took his hand, squeezing tight. Her voice was steady, though it scraped her raw. You carried us this far, I'll carry the rest. His lips twitched, the ghost of a smile, and then his chest stilled. The silence was louder than the river. The medics bowed their heads. O'Neill closed his eyes. The boy clung tighter to his mother, sensing the shift even if he didn't understand. Elena stood rigid, the weight pressing harder than ever. Another torch passed, another name carved into her. But there was no time for grief, not here, not now. She forced her voice steady. We cross now. The river fought them. The rafts bucked and shuddered, ropes creaking, boards groaning. Survivors clung white-knuckled as the current tore at them, pulling, dragging, trying to rip them under. Elena was in the water beside them, pushing, guiding, teeth clenched against the cold bite of the current. Her muscles screamed. Every second felt like hours. One raft splintered halfway across, boards tearing free. Screams erupted. A woman slipped, vanished beneath the froth. Elena lunged, hands clawing at the water, fingers finding fabric. She hauled with everything left in her. The woman coughed, gasping alive. But another man was gone, swept under, swallowed without trace. By the time they dragged themselves onto the far bank, soaked and shivering, the sun was a red wound on the horizon. They had lost two more, Jennings, the man in the current. Elena knelt in the mud, chest heaving, hands trembling uncontrollably. The boy pressed against his mother, both of them sobbing quietly. O'Neill staggered beside her, his face pale, his eyes hollow. "We can't keep bleeding like this." She stared at him, throat tight. "Then we stop bleeding, we walk, we finish this." Her voice cracked, but it carried. The survivors looked at her again, always at her. And in their eyes, belief burned brighter. She hated it, feared it, but she couldn't let it go. She rose, mud dripping from her knees, rifle clutched tight. The river roared behind them, claiming its dead. Ahead, the road stretched into dusk. And Elena walked. For them, for all of them. For the ones who had carried her, and the ones she could never carry back. How do you know when trust is gone? Sometimes it's not a word, not an argument. Sometimes it's just the silence between footsteps, the way eyes slide away when you turn your head, the way hands linger too long near their weapons. Elena felt it in her bones. The forest swallowed them whole after the river. Tall, skeletal trees clawed at the sky, their leaves long since stripped by firestorms. Ash still clung to bark in streaks, and every step sank into mud that sucked greedily at boots. The air smelled of rot and smoke, heavy, damp, suffocating. They moved slowly, every sound amplified in the hush. The boy coughed and was quickly shushed by his mother. O'Neill limped with a stiffness he didn't speak about. The medics whispered in clipped tones, rationing pills, weighing scraps of gauze. It should have felt like progress. They were across the river, the city behind them, but the forest was worse in its own way. It felt alive, watching, waiting. And within the group, something else festered. It started small. Food disappearing from the packs. First a can of beans, then a protein bar. Elena double-checked inventories, questioned the medics. Nobody admitted anything. The boy looked thinner each day. The mother's eyes grew hollow. Elena gave up her own portions quietly, chewing air instead of bread. O'Neill noticed. He said nothing, but his gaze lingered on her too long. That night, as rain pattered through the canopy, she sat awake by the faint glow of embers, rifle across her knees. She listened to the group's breathing, ragged, uneven. Then she heard it, a zipper, soft, careful. Her hand moved to the pistol at her hip before she even turned. One of the men, the quiet one, Davis, was crouched by the supply bag, his hand buried inside. Elena's voice was low, steel wrapped in silk. "Step away." He froze, turned slowly. His face was gaunt, eyes sharp with hunger and something darker. "It's just food," he whispered. "Food for all of us," she said. "You think we'll make it? You really think we'll all walk out?" His voice cracked, rising. "They're slowing us down. The kid, the woman, dead weight, and Jennings is gone. How many more before you see it?" The words hit like slaps. The others stirred, waking. O'Neill sat up, his hand drifting toward his sidearm. The mother clutched her son tight, eyes wide with fear. Elena rose slowly, pistol steady in her hand. "Put it back," she said. Davis's laugh was hollow. "You don't get it. You keep pretending this is about saving people, but it's not. It's about who's strong enough to take what they need." He pulled a knife from his belt, blade glinting in the firelight. The world froze. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She thought of Harris, of Jennings, of all the faces that had fallen so she could stand here now. Her voice was steady, "Don't." But hunger and fear had eaten the man from the inside out. His eyes were wild, and he lunged. The gunshot shattered the silence. Davis collapsed, knife skittering from his hand, eyes wide with shock. Blood seeped into the mud, mixing with rain. The group froze, no one breathed. The boy whimpered. The mother pressed his face into her chest, shielding his eyes. Elena lowered the pistol slowly, her hand trembling. Her stomach twisted, bile burning her throat. She hadn't wanted this, but she had known it might come. O'Neill's voice was rough. You did what you had to. She didn't answer. Because it wasn't about what she had to do. It was about how it hollowed her out each time. She turned, staring into the trees, rain sliding cold down her face. The forest didn't care. The world didn't care. But the survivors were watching, again, always. And she wondered how many more times she'd have to break herself before they reached the end. The next morning they buried Davis in the mud. No words, no prayers, just silence and the smell of wet earth. The group walked quieter after that. No one complained of hunger. No one questioned her decisions, but the silence was heavier than words. Elena felt their fear pressing against her back as much as their reliance. She hated it, and she carried it. That night she sat alone on a ridge overlooking the valley beyond. The forest thinned there, giving way to distant lights flickering weakly against the horizon. A village, or what was left of one. Her breath caught salvation or another trap. She thought of the boy, of his mother, of the medics, of O'Neill limping behind. She thought of Davis buried in mud. And she whispered to the night, to no one and everyone. Just let me carry them one more day. The rain answered, soft, relentless. And she sat in silence, the weight pressing harder, wondering if her story would end in that village, or if death still had one more turn to take. What does hope look like when you no longer trust it? For Elena, it looked like weak light flickering through shattered windows, the smell of cooking fires drifting faintly on the wind, voices, real voices, carrying in the dusk. The village. They had stumbled into its outskirts at dawn. Low houses hunched against the mud, walls patched with sheet metal and tarps. Chickens scattered at their approach. Dogs barked weakly, ribs showing beneath fur. And people, actual people, men and women with lined faces, with calloused hands, children peeking from doorways, eyes wide with something between fear and curiosity. For a moment the survivors froze. Then the boy broke from his mother's grasp, running forward, laughter bursting from him like sunlight through storm clouds. Elena's throat tightened. She had forgotten what that sound was. O'Neill caught her eye, his expression unreadable. Could be good, he muttered. Could be worse. Always suspicion, always the other edge of the blade. And he was right. They were led into the heart of the village by an older man with a limp, his white hair matted beneath a filthy cap. His voice was careful, measured. You come from the city. Elena nodded once, what's left of it. The man's eyes flicked over them, noted the rifles, the mud, the hollowed faces. You lost many. It wasn't a question. Elena said nothing. He gestured them toward a longhouse patched together from salvaged wood and stone. Rest here. Food, if you've got anything to trade. Medicine's thin. Everything's thin. His voice carried the same exhaustion that lived in her bones. The survivors collapsed onto benches and blankets. The boy clung to his mother as villagers drifted in, offering bowls of thin stew, crusts of bread. The smell was enough to make hands shake. For the first time in days, no one looked at Elena for direction. And that unsettled her more than anything. Later, as dusk settled, O'Neill pulled her aside. His voice was low, urgent. Something off, too quiet, too easy. She studied his face. The scar on his jaw, the lines etched deep by years of service. He was a man carved from suspicion, and yet. She felt it too. The way the villagers watched them, not hostile, not welcoming either, something in between. And the way food appeared, just enough but never more. Keep your eyes open, she murmured. He nodded once. But it was too late. That night when most had drifted to sleep, she caught movement by the doorway, a shadow slipping out, quiet, too quiet. She followed. Through the muddy lanes, past shuttered windows, the figure moved fast, hunched. She recognized the limp, one of their own. One of the medics. Her gut twisted. He stopped at a shed on the edge of the village, glancing around before ducking inside. Elena slid to the wall, pressing against the boards. Voices murmured inside. His, and the old villager with the limp. She caught only fragments. Supplies enough for them, you promised. Not all, can't feed everyone choices. Her chest tightened. Choices, always choices. The medic stepped out, clutching a bundle under his coat. His eyes widened when he saw her. Elena. Her pistol was already raised. Who were you talking to? She hissed. His voice cracked. You don't understand. They won't let us all stay. Food's too short. They said maybe if I helped, if I gave them our medical stock, they'd take me, keep me alive. The words were knives. He shifted the bundle. Pills, bandages, the last threads holding the survivors together. They would have killed us without this, he whispered desperately. At least this way. The crack of her fist broke his sentence. He crumpled into the mud, clutching his jaw. Elena stood over him, chest heaving. Her voice was ice. You gave them our lives for your comfort. He sobbed, mud streaking his face. I just wanted to live. She stared down at him, pistol shaking in her hand. For a heartbeat, she saw Davis's eyes again. Hunger, desperation, the same rot, just another mask. She lowered the weapon. Not mercy, just exhaustion. Go, she whispered. Run, don't come back. His eyes widened, shock, then relief. He scrambled to his feet, vanishing into the trees. And she knew she'd just signed his death sentence. But it wasn't hers to carry anymore. When she returned, O'Neill was waiting. He read it in her face without a word. Another gone, he muttered. Elena nodded, her jaw tight. And in that silence, something shifted. The survivors no longer looked at her with blind faith. They looked at her with something harsher, rower. The boy, curled against his mother, whispered, You won't leave us, right? Her chest ached. She crouched, brushing damp hair from his face. I'll carry you, she whispered, as far as it takes. And for the first time, she wondered if she believed it herself. That night she couldn't sleep. She walked to the edge of the village, staring at the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond lay the border. Somewhere beyond lay safety, if it even still existed. But here now death pressed in from all sides, not as bullets, not as bombs, but as hunger, betrayal, fear. And she realized something that hollowed her to the core. Death didn't always kill the body first. Sometimes it killed the trust. And once that was gone, what was left? Her hands clenched around the rifle, mud caking her skin, rain dripping down her face. Tomorrow they would move, whether the villagers wanted it or not. She had no more room for bargains. No more patience for hope that asked for payment in lives. The story would end soon, she could feel it. And when it did, she only prayed there would be enough left of her to still carry the boy's voice, the mother's eyes, O'Neill's stubborn weight. Because death had claimed all around her. But she still walked. And she would walk until the story ran out. How do you know when you've reached the end? It wasn't a line on a map. Not for Elena. It was the way the land opened up after days of choking forest. The way the air felt lighter, though her chest was heavier. The way the road turned from mud into broken pavement, stretching straight toward a horizon she almost didn't believe in anymore. And in the distance, razor wire, guard towers, flags that still moved in the wind. The border. The survivors stopped as one, staring. Some sank to their knees, sobbing quietly. The mother pulled the boy against her chest, whispering into his hair. O'Neill just stood, lips pressed tight, eyes unreadable. Elena didn't move. Not yet. Because hope could be a mirage. She had seen it too many times. Her hand stayed tight on her rifle as she scanned the towers. No movement, no gunfire, Just the lonely sound of the wind and the distant caw of crows circling fields that had long since turned to ash. "Think it's real?" O'Neill asked, voice low. Elena didn't answer. Because the real question wasn't whether it was real. It was whether they would be allowed through. They moved slowly, every step louder than it should have been. Boots crunching gravel, breath rasping, hearts thudding in unison. The razor wire loomed taller, coiled like a sleeping snake. The gates stood shut, rust streaking their iron skin. Elena raised a hand, signaling the group to stop. She stepped forward alone, rifle slung, hands visible. Her voice carried, hoarse but steady. "We're survivors from the city. We've lost everything, we have wounded, we need passage." Silence. Her throat tightened. Then movement. A figure appeared on the tower, helmet catching the dying light. A rifle rested across the railing. "Turn back," the voice barked, distorted through a loudspeaker. "Borders closed, no passage." The words hit harder than any bullet. Elena's knees nearly buckled. O'Neill swore under his breath. The mother sobbed, clutching the boy tight. Elena's voice cracked against the stillness. "There's nothing left behind us, just fire and death. If we go back, we die." "Not our problem," the voice answered coldly. Her hands shook. Rage surged hot, burning through exhaustion. She stepped forward, fists clenched. "We carried the dead through streets of ash. We crossed rivers that swallowed men whole. We bled and broke and buried more names than you'll ever know. And we're still here. You hear me? We're still here." Her voice echoed across the barren fields, ragged and raw. For a long moment, nothing. Then another voice, not through the speaker this time. Closer, a guard at the gate, a woman. "How many?" Elena turned. "5, a child, that's all that's left." The guard's face was shadowed beneath her helmet. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "We're not supposed to open it." Elena's chest tightened. She saw the hesitation, the flicker of humanity. And she knew this was the moment. Not a firefight, not a grand stand, just a single thread between mercy and refusal. She stepped closer, her voice breaking into something raw, stripped of armor. "Death has taken everyone I loved, everyone I fought beside, but I carried their story here. I carried it in my hands, in my blood, in every breath I didn't deserve to take. Don't let it end at a gate." Silence again, the kind that stretched and stretched, threatening to snap. Then metal groaned. The gate shifted, just enough. The woman guard's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Go, before someone changes their mind." The survivors surged forward, dragging one another, sobbing, clutching hands. The boys' laughter burst out again, wild and relieved. O'Neill caught Elena's arm, squeezing hard. "You did it." But she didn't move. She stood at the threshold, staring back at the land behind, the ruins, the forest, the river, the graves hidden in mud and ash. Her heart pounded, her chest ached. And she whispered almost to herself, "No, they did." The others pressed through, swallowed by safety's shadow. The guards herded them quickly, quietly, before higher eyes could notice. Elena lingered, rifle still in her grip. The woman guard looked at her, brow furrowed. "Aren't you coming?" Elena's lips parted, but no words came. Because something deep inside her knew her place wasn't beyond that gate. Not yet. Her place was with the one she'd carried. The dead who still walked in her blood. She set the rifle down gently against the fence, straightened, lifted her chin. And for the first time since the city, since Harris, since Jennings, since Davis in the mud, she let herself breathe without weight. The guard's voice broke the moment. "Why?" Elena's eyes softened. "Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." She turned, walking back into the wasteland, steps slow but steady, the setting sun painting her in gold. Behind her the gate slammed shut. The survivors never saw her again. But the boy, years later, would remember her name, Not from records, not from medals, but from the story his mother whispered on nights when the world felt heavy. She carried death on her shoulders, his mother would say, but she never let it claim her soul. And in the silence after those words, he would close his eyes and see her, not broken, not gone, but walking, always walking. The screen fades, music drops to a whisper, and the final image is just that. A lone figure back turned, walking into a horizon of ash and light. Unspoken, unforgotten. Her story carried by those who lived.